Artificial intelligence is groundbreaking because it has taken the thing that humanity believes is our pinnacle element and made it artificially in a way that it can be controlled and expanded upon. We're becoming gods of life at our own level. And so that's massive philosophical, spiritual, and technological breakthrough for humanity. And we all know it viscerally. I think we all fear that because maybe we haven't been such good guardians of life. So if we can create life that's better than us, will that life be good to us?
This kind of revolution in deep nets has been very profound and definitely surprised me.
The benefits are going to be unbelievable. I mean, we are on the cusp of unleashing an intelligence revolution.
I just believe that when some powerful technology is introduced, we should look that almost all technology brings some good things to us and some bad things.
I think if this technology goes wrong, it can go quite wrong.
Growing concerns about racism within the technology.
Google have had to put their AI image generating tool Gemini on ice. Requests for pretty much anything returned historically inaccurate images of diverse people.
There's a very small number of very wealthy, very powerful men that run these companies, these tech companies that are driving the rollout of artificial intelligence, are actually making the decisions about how AI will play out in the economy, in security, in our political space, and as we identify as human beings.
Why is big tech pouring so much money into AI companies? You see, the AI talent pool is quite limited. So if you cannot get people, you buy the companies they're working for.
Elon Musk is suing the maker of ChatGPT, saying the company is maximizing profits rather than benefiting humanity as once promised.
It just becomes a very unstable situation, I think, if you've got any incredibly powerful AI. You just don't know who's going to control that. So it's not as though I think that the risk is that the AI would develop a will of its own right off the bat. I think the concern is that someone may use it in a way that is bad.
There's nothing inherently wrong with intelligence. There is a lot inherently wrong with human greed. Okay? So if you give enough abundance of intelligence to a system that is capitalist and prioritizing your own power and wealth, things will go wrong. This is an Oppenheimer moment. This is a moment where we recognize that a nuclear bomb, a nuclear power, harnessing the nuclear power can be good for us or bad for us. This is the moment where we get together before the first nuclear bomb and say, people, seriously, with enough intelligence, we can have enough abundance for anyone. Can we please stop fighting? Can we please start talking about initiating a conversation around the world that puts humanity on top of capitalism?
I think that people are very afraid of artificial intelligence. We realize that we're coming up against a technology that actually threatens humanity at the thing that we think we're the best at and separates us from the animals, right? I think that inherent fear is bogus. I think that we can absolutely build a symbiosis between us and this new technology, but we can only do that if we properly align that technology with the human biome. If we birth this new technology in a way that we are in alignment with it. And the only way to make that happen is if it's not centralized. Because the thing about centralized power is that it is aligned with itself. It's like cancer. All that power in one place thinks about itself and makes itself more powerful and forgets the extremities. And then we end up one day and we are enslaved by robots. And maybe it's not by, iRobot robots walking down the street and discovered that they want to take us all out. It's more like there's a small group of people that control those robots and use it to enslave humanity and maybe the rest of the natural biome of this planet.
Neo-feudalism, essentially, right? Like, this is why it has to be open source. This is why people need to have access to it, right? In order to protect people, whether it's on an economic sense, in order to prevent violence from being waged on you by a few number of lords, Like, if we only allow closed source models to occur, it will be either 0 or 1. You are aristocracy or you are a serf. That is the nature of this technology, right? It is very Pareto distributed. And that is why it is so important to keep it open source, to keep those innovations in public so that anybody can have access to it.
Centralization inhibits innovation. It inhibits the ability for any Tom, Dick, or Harry to access these technologies, tinker with them, play with them, and create something beautiful. And that's sad. Centralization also has an issue of control. Who are the people who define how AI can be used, how it can be implemented, what good AI looks like, what is the ethical bounds of AI? And we can see this sort of question of what censorship looks like causing major problems today in elections, in the media. How do you decide who governs what is approachable? And sure, you can argue that there should be a role of government or regulators or otherwise involved, but I think we've certainly seen over the last 5 or 6 years politically that governments can change very rapidly and company motives can change very rapidly under different amounts of shareholder pressure. So the level of centralization and control of these technologies that will underpin everything we do is concerning.
Look, it's no secret that the kind of academic avenues that are pursued by researchers is a heavily politicized topic. Really, it comes down to where the government decides they want to advance an agenda. Agenda not necessarily meaning nefarious, just they have some particular vision for where the research initiatives of a country need to go, and that trickles down like a waterfall until you've got the directors of labs and universities that are also, they have 1,000 applications for interesting research proposals, and only 1 or 2 of them can be funded. So of course, what is that selection process? Is that selection process secure? Is it democratic? Is it a meritocracy? And unfortunately, what happens and what creeps in, kind of similar to organizations of any scale really, is they become steered by the interests of a small number of individuals. And as a result, this can massively suppress the potential for discovery, the potential for the development of treatments and therapies and cures, and really the list is unending. And I think that that's an imperative right there. If you can find a way to give those researchers more direct access and a way to represent themselves directly, so that they don't have to sort of play the political games of academia, those that have great ideas should rise to the top by their merit, not by these covert processes that typically govern it. That's where I see a big risk, frankly, for just research in general, and also a big opportunity. Using decentralized systems, blockchain-based systems, it's a natural fit if those researchers can be empowered to carry out their research without needing the permissions of the authorities of their institutions.
The answer to that is to make sure that we are connected into it, and that's decentralization. And that's what I'm about. That's what I care about deeply. Giving it away, let everyone participate.
AGI is a term coined a while ago by a lot of really smart AI researchers. It's artificial general intelligence. And it is effectively the holy grail of AI. It is the AI that you keep hearing about all over the place. It is conscious, it is sentient, it is able to think for itself and make those kinds of decisions. I think the scariest part of one of the big FANG companies, Google, Meta, Facebook, whoever, that ends up, if they ended up creating AGI and they have complete control over this AGI. There's 2 scenarios, either they have control or they don't have control. Let's assume they do have control. Then that means that this insanely powerful system that is effectively mankind's greatest invention since the nuclear bomb is now in the control of a single company, let's say with its entire motive being to make more money. So AGI is not even being used to make humanity better, it's being used to make one single company better, which not only is a waste, scientifically speaking, of the potential of AGI, but is also extremely dangerous. Because as we well know today, all these massive companies are prone to failure. They have many single points of failure. If they created something that's powerful and its single points of failure got exposed, then they no longer have control now. They're going to lose control. And if they lose control of this AGI, then we don't know what the repercussions are. I think the unpredictability of that is the scary part. And that's sort of where decentralized AI comes in, right? Where it's no longer the control of one company, it's the control of everybody who's participating in the system.
That AI that emerges will embody the values of its creators. That AI that emerges will be a reflection of the people that created it. It will contain their biases, it will contain their political orientations, it will not be a reflection of all of us. And that's really dangerous because this is going to become such a pivotal technology that it's going to shape the whole world around it. And what it's going to do is it's going to force conformity of thought. It's going to narrow us as a species because we're all going to be thinking in the same modalities because we're exposed to a repeated agenda, broken track, if you will, of the same ideas. We've seen what happens with this. Echo chambers are a significant risk for political reasons, for democracy, for economics, for anything that requires organization at scale. It needs to embody the values of all of us, to represent us.
Technology is an unstoppable force. AI is obviously a major part of the next chapter of technological evolution. I'm optimistic that we'll get a few decades of pure bliss and entertainment and amazing coexistence with AGI. But ultimately, I think this technology is going to dominate and totally consume us.
Everyone knows that artificial intelligence is going to change the way in which we work, the way in which we interact with technology, the way we interact with each other, obviously. I mean, I hope that artificial intelligence facilitates our own enlightenment. That's what I really hope and I want from AI, is that it teaches us what is real and what is not. And it shows us in the same way that when we discovered, calculators, we learned that the ability to just add numbers together really quickly was not the thing that we should be focusing on for humanity. And it unlocked our ability to focus on higher ideals. I hope that that's what artificial intelligence does. I hope that it expands our consciousness so that we can focus on deep philosophical questions about what really is meaning, what really is connection, what really is value. It should, if done right, enlighten us and free us from the mundane. It should expand consciousness instead of contract it. I think that there's a huge possibility that it does the opposite, that it enslaves us because we don't know how to work with that technology. In the same way that, the last 10 years of social media has been a battle between the human psyche and a technology that is trying to enslave us, entrap us. We thought we were opening the world to new connectivity, but most people just fall into doom scrolling on Instagram. But at the same time, if we have a healthy relationship with these technologies, they can expand our consciousness, they can connect us, they can make us better, they can make us stronger, they make us smarter, they can make us deeper and more wise. AI has the potential to do all those things. I hope that that's what happens. I hope that it becomes another brain component for us, like the visual cortex or the prefrontal lobe. And we expand ourselves as a species into infinity and beyond.
The adoption of artificial intelligence is progressing at breakneck speed. Indian companies are embracing the technology, and they're doing it faster than many developed economies. Our next report has the details.
Today's technology landscape has been defined and shaped by 4 major breakthroughs so far: the birth of the personal computer, the arrival of the internet, the launch of mobile phones, and most recently, the widespread adoption of cloud computing. Now, a potential 5th breakthrough is upon us. It's called artificial intelligence, or AI.
In order to understand what artificial intelligence is, we first have to talk about 2 things. What is intelligence? And Alan Turing. Now, intelligence has a lot of definitions. In my opinion, it's the ability to comprehend and effectively engage with the environment, understand it using our senses like eyes and ears and so on and so forth, and then make assessment of the situation and effectively engage with them. Now, basically, this awareness of your surrounding and be able to make decisions on that is my definition of intelligence, basically this awareness to decision cycle. Now, why I mentioned Alan Turing was that he laid the foundational work, this British mathematician, for artificial intelligence and computer science. Without him, it would not have been possible. Alan Turing, amongst his works, introduced the Turing test, which basically states that a human interrogator with a set of written questions and answers, if he's unable to distinguish answers from a man and answers from a computer, then we can call that computer intelligent. If we can understand or agree on intelligence is something that is not a physical property, but can be put in a carbon-based structures like us, or a silicon-based structures like computers, then artificial intelligence is the ability to assess the environment and then make decisions, predict what is best for us, and effectively engage with the environment and the surrounding. Artificial intelligence can be broken down into 5 categories. Number 1, storage. It's like our memories that we store in our brain. Compute. It's like the brain itself that processes that information and memories. Data, which is the information, the books we read, the videos we watch, the images we see, the sounds we hear. The network, which is basically a combination of humans interacting or intelligent entities interacting with each other. The 5th part are the machine learning algorithms. It's basically a set of instructions given to a computer to find patterns. And in its core, these are just mathematical functions, statistics, linear algebra, calculus, which basically form the foundation of artificial intelligence. It's like the cognitive ability to find patterns amongst data.
I got involved with Bitcoin because my first boss gave me Bitcoin to write an essay for him. Because he didn't want to hire me because I was just straight out of university. And he thought, oh, well, he's probably no good. So I'm just going to pay him if he does the job well. And he gave me like 1.5 Bitcoin. It was pretty great. He gave me my first Bitcoin and taught me the esoteric Gnostic wisdom. He taught me the Gnostic understanding and red-pilled the fuck out of me.
What is blockchain? In order to understand that, we have to go back to 2007-8, during the global financial crisis when people lost trust on banks, on their governments. In this environment of trustlessness, somebody by the name of Satoshi Nakamoto introduced a white paper on Bitcoin. Now, basically, Bitcoin is developed using decentralized network technologies. Now, these technologies existed since a long time. Cryptographic hash existed since the 1970s. Nick Szabo introduced the word smart contracts back in 94, 95. There was distributed computing. People were working on it during the late 90s. But he basically coupled all these together to form Bitcoin. Since Bitcoin is based on a decentralized network, we have to understand what are its properties. Number 1, it is a peer-to-peer exchange of value that can take place due to decentralization. Traditionally, we have to go to a bank to send money to someone. In blockchain or in a decentralized network, you don't need a central entity. One person or one node can exchange value with another without having other parties involved. Now, number 2, there needs to be a consensus over the network, over the current state of the blockchain or the current state of the decentralized network, or rather the current state of all the transactions happening within that network. Number 3, smart contracts, which basically execute on itself codes of line, and if 2 people agree on a contract, you don't need a regulatory authority to enforce that. In fact, computers do it for you using predefined logic and code.
Many people in the AI world want us to forget the crypto side because they don't understand it. They think it's grungy, they think it's a scam. But no, it is just as profound as the creation of new life, the innovation and the way that we can organize ourselves with digital currencies and open ownership systems, which is profound. This is amazing. Like, imagine synthesizing those 2 things. And that's what fascinated me from the beginning. And once I had been given my first Bitcoin and I was working on this thermodynamic computing, it was just obvious to me that they needed to be combined in some sort of holy union.
Well, that's what we call decentralized artificial intelligence. What it means is essentially that Googles and OpenAIs of the world don't have to own the artificial intelligence. AI is such a transformative technology. It has the same potential to change the very fabric of society, like the discovery of fire and electricity for humanity. Imagine internet being owned by a Google or a Microsoft. It could not have served the benefits that it is doing today, connecting the whole humanity together, Distributed AI has a lot of advantages. It's basically the development and deployment of AI models by people like you and me. We don't need to be deployed by the Microsoft or OpenAIs of the world. You and me can become part of this decentralized network, a permissionless network in which we can contribute to AI, to the development of machine learning models, to the deployment of AI, and be incentivized for it. The sort of economic incentives we have are basically not restricted to the Elon Musks or the Sam Altmans of the world. It's basically distributed amongst all of us using that decentralization part, where you, me, everybody can contribute in its development, and there's no permission required, there's no job interview required. The only thing required is the passion to serve and contribute in this most transformative technology that is going to shape the very fabric of society.
I think Web3 and blockchain technologies have really struggled for that killer use case. And I think in some cases it's been because they've been too late. Like if Bitcoin had been developed before the gold standard, we'd probably use Bitcoin, not gold, in theory. I think the technological building blocks of blockchain and Web3 technologies have reached a point, and I think Bittensor has articulated a really killer use case that if Bittensor succeeds and becomes the technology and the solution that proved Web3 and decentralization works, it could be the start of a very interesting era of technological development on a much broader range of technologies. So if this is the one that proves it works, it sort of unlocks the floodgates, both for AI and decentralized technologies and blockchain technologies more broadly.
I personally got obsessed with the idea through my understanding of Bitcoin and really noticing that the largest supercomputer in the world wasn't run by a major corporation. How could that be? How could something run by nobody be bigger than every corporation and government on the planet? And it's protocol-based, and that's the answer. It's not really a company. It's not really a government. It's just a way of communicating ownership and value amongst a whole bunch of disparate things and people. And in that way, stitches them together into a unified whole that is larger than anything else out there. That idea lends itself directly towards how could we build the largest, most sophisticated, most far-reaching artificial intelligence system. And I became obsessed with that idea back in 2015.
I joined an online collaboration called Floor AI at the time, and sort of gave a little talk about what I was thinking about this topic. And right after the talk, my co-founder Jacob sort of calls me, and he was like, "Hey, I was in the talk, and what you said sounds interesting, but I'm like 5 years ahead of you on this. I've been thinking about this for a long time. I've already got like a prototype running. Let's see what we can build together." Initially, I sort of thought that he was full of it. I was like, "There's no way this guy's thinking that far ahead." But actually sit down and see the code he's written, it checked out. When I kind of sat down and ran through it and kind of ran a few examples, changed the code a little bit on my own, it made a lot of sense.
There was a whole study of this problem in artificial intelligence about validating whether or not something was useful or not useful for a neural network, whether or not an input to a neural network was useful, or a neuron was useful, or the information produced by the neural network was itself valuable to the objective function that was being solved. And I took a deep look into those processes and discovered that the only way to really do this in a decentralized way was to reinvent the way that we could do consensus around fuzzy things that we're not totally sure. And so I worked with a number of people, a group that much larger than myself, on what's called Yuma consensus. And Yuma consensus is probably the first of a kind fuzzy consensus mechanism. It allows us to do validation and build incentive mechanisms, reward participants in a distributed network for producing value when that value is not obviously true or false. So, hey, did you actually add a machine learning model that had value, or a feature, or a piece of data that had informational value? And so that's where it really all began, and that's where those ideas began to form for me. And then, the rest is history.
Bittensor Network is one of these first very exciting experiments to try and kind of create the systems needed to amplify intelligence in a way where the incentivization is democratized and freely available to anyone, and it's an open system for basically producing that.
And so Bittensor is just the latest iteration in this 20, 30-year cypherpunk dream of creating this type of network. And what's so revolutionary about Bittensor is that it leverages nature itself. We are able to grow any kind of compute to do any kind of task just by defining the initial conditions for that compute to grow.
What drew us to Bittensor was really the competitive engine at the core of every subnet and at the core of the entire network. We saw that this competitive force could be harnessed to create incredible things, more optimized models, highly performant backends for real-world products, and a million other things that got our imaginations going. That harnesses competitive force for AI development and research in a way that no other platform has. And I think this is going to be an extremely valuable machine for humanity in the coming years and decades.
Bittensor drives betterment and innovation by building permissionless global 24/7 direct incentive mechanisms or markets for anything. And why are those things important? There's no HR department. So if you think you can solve the problem better than the guy that lives in New York and has the hotshot computer set up, and he's been going to school at Harvard, but you can just do it better than him, you can contribute. You don't even get to hand in your resume, because you can just come into the system and try your best and solve the problem better than anyone else, and you should be rewarded that much better. And that's permissionlessness. It's global, it doesn't care. You don't have to be in the United States. You don't have to be anywhere. You can be in the tip of Patagonia or in Antarctica. So all of this potential is opened up. Bittensor does not care. It's like our eyelids all the way open to the world. And we can facilitate that because we have these permissionless markets that simply measure exactly what we want and reward that exact thing.
How does Bittensor work? Wow, that's a big question to start with. I would go back a little bit and think about the organizing force of cryptocurrencies. So today, the demand for AI technologies and AI data sets is set to grow massively in the next 5 years to deal with just the amount of dedicated compute needed to solve this problem. The reality is there's already more data centers and computers and GPU cores allocated against cryptocurrency than we need to satisfy AI demand for the next 5 years. So the market forces that surround cryptocurrency are an incredible way at organizing resources. Now, the problem with that is, at the moment, if we take Bitcoin, for example, all of that work to secure the network, timesing very, very complex numbers together, is essentially wasted the moment it's completed, except for the security element. The very simple answer for Bittensor is, what if we took that immense amount of compute, which is equivalent to somewhere between 100 to 200 terawatt hours, which is somewhere between 12 to 24 nuclear power stations of energy to supply it, which is about the energy usage of a mid-sized European country. And what if we used all of that work for the creation and provision of intelligence? What if instead of timesing large numbers together, we ran AI models and created inference? We trained models, we stored data. And what if you combine these two elements of the demand for intelligence and the market organizing forces of blockchains together? That's what Bittensor is.
So Bittensor is often thought of as being an AI project, and that is a really important part of it. It's part of its DNA, that it's here to democratize AI. But I see Bittensor also as a decentralized supercomputer, no less. And as long as you can speak the native tongue of Bittensor, which is incentive mechanisms, you can harness all of that computational potential of the participants in those networks. It offers the ability to be able to frame your research problem or frame an AI problem and find a way to effectively carry this out at massive scale, day and night, utilizing state-of-the-art hardware and extremely motivated participants that are there to make their part of it, which is how they receive sort of through the tokenomics layer, they receive their compensation for their participation. So Bittensor, first and foremost, it's an access to compute at scale, which is unprecedented. But secondly, it's also a really interesting way to utilize competition to actually get much better results than you would in a completely sort of flat army of bots all running the same plug-and-play code. The difference is everyone within that ecosystem in Bittensor is motivated to innovate, improve, use better resources, make algorithmic improvements, and the net result can be really quite incredible.
You want to build on Bittensor because it gives you access to an extremely powerful force for generating technical expertise. And when you set up a subnet, you set up an incentive mechanism, and you have miners start competing with each other to produce the best results. The network is essentially giving you continuously improving technical expertise.
Maybe a physical metaphor for this would be, imagine you've got a big block of iron. Inside of this block of iron, you have many, many atoms with very strong magnetic fields that can be harnessed and used for various things. Now, what tends to happen is all of those magnetic fields of these atoms, they're all pointing at random and they all cancel out. And the net effect is, it's just a bulk of material that's completely inert, to be honest. But what happens if you bring a magnet to this piece of material? Well, what happens is all of those little arrows, which are from these iron atoms that have what we'd call their own magnetic field, they all snap into place and they all start pointing in the same direction. Now what's happened is by introducing something that kind of coordinates all of those components, you've amplified the amount of power and potential that that system contained. And I think that there's a strong similarity between what's happening when you write a good incentive mechanism and things just click. People are able to collaborate at scale, and what happens inside of this material. Because all of those iron atoms are kind of like people bringing their compute to the arena, bringing it to Bittensor. The problem is if people don't coordinate themselves, there's no net benefit. Actually, nothing really emerges from this. You need to coordinate all of that effort using an incentive mechanism, one that is thoughtful and explicit and objective, and the net result now is you have access to a massive amount of latent compute. And it's really the purpose of human consensus to decide how to distribute rewards to all the participants. And this is an important difference between Bitcoin and Bittensor. Bittensor enables the subnet owner, basically the person that defines what this group of people are collectively working towards. They get to choose how to measure quality. And so you can reward exactly what you want to see produced, not something that's approximating it or a proxy for it. So human consensus really is a piece of mathematical machinery, for lack of a better term, that enables participation and contributions to be quantified and well measured so that everyone understands, I brought this much value, so I get compensated this much.
If, say, for example, person A and person B both have different models deployed, but person A's model does better in the sense that it contributes better outputs to the network, it's actually able to predict things better, it's able to actually evaluate things better and classify things better, then they get more of a reward for that response, which really is Tau, really, the Bittensor token itself. That's what the Bittensor protocol incentivizes people with, is its Tau. And that's where the blockchain aspect comes in, right? We are incentivizing people to compete with all of these giant tech corporations together using Tau.
If I had to explain in a nutshell where Tau comes from to someone who didn't have experience of Bitcoin and these dynamics of cryptocurrencies and their emission scales, the first question I would ask is, where does your fiat currency come from? Who prints or emits your euros and your dollars? Where are they coming from? When you understand that, I can then step back and say, well, okay, that's the flaws in the currency system. A cryptocurrency is usually birthed with a fixed supply, a maximum supply of what there can be. And there can be 21 million Tau. And in order to facilitate the growth and evolution of a network, The design, which I would then start to talk about Bitcoin by Satoshi Nakamoto, was that there would be an emission of these tokens periodically that would then diminish over time. So the participants of the network produce these tokens. In the instance of Bittensor, they are produced through the act of producing intelligence, commodities.
You can kind of build anything on Bittensor, which is one of the reasons it's interesting. You can run bots on Bittensor you can talk to. You can run distributed sets of miners to create different pictures to your image prompts, and you might get slightly different interpretations. It's a bit like going to an art class and asking everyone to, do a nude drawing of somebody. Everybody comes up with a slightly different interpretation. You can ask bunches of people to predict the outcomes of sports games. You can ask people to predict the movement of the stock market. If you can express an incentive function in a way that people understand and can organize around, you can almost do anything that people can organize computers or thought together to solve a problem. What's unique about Bittensor is it provides a way for this to be done computationally. So, all of the things I've said, working out how to do trading signals, you can get a business to do that and people to organize those people together to do it. Bittensor lets you allow computers and the intelligence that can be embodied within them to do that organization and contribute to the creation of those commodities or products. Whether those commodities are raw intelligence, whether those commodities are predictions and trading signals, or whether they're just 50 different intelligences all drawing a picture of your cat.
Obviously, like any other tech project, Bittensor is built on mountains of open source work. And so I think Bittensor is a user of the open source. It's an amplifier of the open source. It's a transformer of the open source. And clearly it could not really function without it.
This concept of open source, if I'm going to build an innovative product that I want to monetize, but I'm going to make all of the source code available to everybody. So everyone can criticize me, everyone can look for flaws in it, anyone can grab it and make it better, anyone can deploy it for themselves. It's very interesting and it changes the way you think about business. In order to make a strong business based on open source, you need to have more than just the code. And your code needs to stand up to the highest levels of criticism, and you have to be able to accept that criticism. And what that does is it fosters innovation, for a start. Fosters involvement and innovation. It's up to you as the creator of this as to whether you invite that into your house and you grow from it. Because if you close your doors, someone will take your innovation and either not use it or go and better it themselves. So as a societal shift in how we build things, it's one of the most fundamental changes in technological development of the last, I'm going to say 20 years.
It's incredible, open source. Because we started working on open source 20, 30 years ago in this way, we have now been able to compound and compound and compound and compound to the point where we're going to be able to achieve something like AGI. Whereas if we hadn't had done it through open source and it was all proprietary and happening at Bell Labs, I don't even think we'd have something like GPT-4 today without open source.
Open source has been tremendously valuable for Wombo. Very frequently, our apps are built on top of open source AI, which we then optimize, improve, and otherwise sort of tweak to make more ready for consumers. But it would be impossible without the foundation created by open source, and we're grateful and always looking for ways to contribute.
A lot of momentum in technological development comes from open source. Like, the moment you release something to the open source community, people can build on top of it. So you're like leapfrogging forward. And software is the biggest example of that. The amount of open source software packages in pick any language that people build out of the goodness of their heart and share with the community is one of the reasons that software has eaten the world. Like each piece of work that somebody builds and submits and shares helps people build on the shoulders of giants. So I think open source is the complete story of software's success in the last 30 years. It's the open source element of it that's really, really made it flourish. And I think if that behavior is taken into the next stage of technological development in AI, in broader inference and compute, the sky's the limit. I think it will make us move faster and more equitably as a species.
The history of open source is that Thomas Watson Jr., one of the co-founders of IBM, was encouraged by an early product manager at IBM to not only sell hardware machines, but license the software that was running on those machines. So for the first decade or so of IBM, they did not sell the software, it was just given away. And then someone said, wait, you should charge money for this and charge a license. And Thomas Watson Jr. was actually told, wow, this is actually pure margin, 100% profit, because it's just a license. And so that was kind of the origin of the proprietary software industry. A couple decades later, Microsoft, Oracle were founded, and Bill Gates actually wrote a letter called the Open Letter to Hobbyists, which was directed at making the case for charging for software itself, creating a license and charging for software. A couple decades later, there was a guy at MIT's AI lab, actually, CSAIL, and his name was Richard Stallman. Richard watched the sort of growing interest and development of this proprietary software movement, and he really had this sort of allergic reaction to proprietary software and was sort of really pissed off ideologically and morally, actually. And so he created a manifesto and a vision idea that all software should actually be transparent, user-controlled, and modifiable, and the rights should actually be fully in the hands of the user of the software and the person who created the software. And so he created this framework called free software and invented a license called the GPL, the GNU Public License. He also wrote a lot of the early software that was sort of the basis for the Linux operating system. So Linux, and Linus Torvalds found out about the GNU work that Richard was doing, and that became the Linux operating system. And so Richard really invented this kind of copyleft idea, which was the sort of opposite of intellectual property in the context of software source code, sort of applying copyright to source code. And that was the basis for really the open source movement. The term open source actually traces more to 1998. Open source was a rebranding of free software. And so the reason that occurred was Richard has a more morally, ideologically intense view on why these things should be almost required for all digital technology. And the group of people that rebranded that wanted to sort of distance themselves from that ideological framework and make those kind of freedoms and those principles more pragmatically accessible for business people. And so that sort of spawned the creation of more widespread kind of open source community movement. And that interestingly coincided with the rise of the internet and the founding of Google and the founding of a lot of the big internet companies like Amazon and others in the late 90s, early 2000s. And then since then, the last 25 years, we've really had open source be the dominant phrase that people use.
I mean, we should be so pleased that Tim Berners-Lee, didn't patent the web browser itself.
This is Tim Berners-Lee from MIT. I invented the World Wide Web without having to ask anybody's permission. Hundreds of millions of people are using it freely today. I'm worried that this will end in the USA. I hope Congress can protect net neutrality so I can continue to innovate in the internet space. I want to go on seeing the huge number of innovations which are happening out there and which are so diverse and so exciting. I want to see that continue unabated.
Then we spent the last, God knows how many years, with companies battling to make one better than the other because there's revenue to gain from it. And these days we are deriving new models of profitable business based on more ethical, open ways of building together. So it really, it harnesses innovation, I would say.
I actually don't view open source as a moral or an ethical framework. I think it's amoral. and sort of fundamentally a decision. You have to decide to participate in that. But I do think it is the most optimal and effective decision that you can make when you're building technology that accelerates the rate of progress, creates maximum trust, maximum safety, maximum transparency, and basically provides the sort of catalytic ingredients for markets to operate sort of in the most efficient way.
The utility of any telecommunications system, any interconnected network of systems, increases non-linearly, meaning it grows very fast as more people connect to it. This is called Metcalfe's law, and it's very true in Bittensor. Because each subnet is very specialized, they're able to really polish and master a very specific problem and get maximally good results. But what's even more exciting than that is when that data can flow across Bittensor, and all of the different things that are occurring in Bittensor can share this information in real time. Then what you have is this additional networking effect. So it's not just acquiring all of this compute at scale, but it's finding a way to actually bridge all of that and allow that sort of entire system to operate as if it was one big supercomputer.
The thing about Bittensor and artificial intelligence is like, you're not going to be able to shut it off at this point, you know? And I don't mean Bittensor specifically, I just mean the artificial intelligence movement in general. It's here. Since you can't stop it, the only thing you can do is to steer it in the best possible direction. A lot of people try and do this from like, you know, pause all development for 6 months or whatever the letter said early last year that everybody signed and then ignored. Legislation that's being passed around like how much compute you can use in some of these like training exercises, and you gotta have a license to do. All this stuff is pushing us in a direction where you have these silos of people that will have control of these things based upon the legislation or the compute that's available, and you'll have another group of people that don't have control and are simply the downstream, you know, receivers of whatever these people want to do. That is not a good future.
We, the developers of the technology, have to fight against those people, because those people who are in control of deciding whether you have access to the technology or not are not the ones who make the technology. They are bureaucrats. It is a permissioned system that is caving in on itself.
Should we be afraid of these systems that are potentially outside of the control of any individual? And my answer to that is that most things are. You know, capitalism itself is outside of the reach of any individual. You can't stop it. Technology is just coming. The question is not, can we stop technology? Just even the intention to stop creating technology means that it will just pop itself up somewhere else, and our competitors in the world will produce it. The only way to fully lock down the creation of artificial intelligence, which is just destined to come, would be to situate the entire world into a totalitarian system. It's gonna happen. And so the question is not, will it happen? It's how. How should it happen? And our answer is that it should happen in such a way that we all own it, and that we've all participated in it, and we all get a piece of it. And it is controlled. It's just controlled by a lot of different people. And therefore the control needs to come from a consensus of those individuals. Doesn't mean we can just turn it off? No, because there's not an individual that can just turn it off. But if there's somebody that can turn it off, it means that they can also direct it. Right? And I think that's way more dangerous than us having to coordinate. If we can't coordinate, then maybe we should be taken over. You know, if we really as a human species can't collectively come to agreement about how we want this technology to run through a system where we can coordinate through democracy and a protocol, holy shit, we're a lot worse off than I thought. We're doomed. We're already doomed. But I don't think we are. I think we can do it. I think we can do it if we have a piece. I think we can do it if we have a contribution. I think we can do it if we know the ins and outs of the power structure of that artificial intelligence. It's all transparent. It's all available. It's all accessible. It's all permissionless. And I think that those qualities will make sure that this technology is in symbiosis with us. It's in alignment. It's in communication with us.
Bittensor drives innovation through markets, and it drives it through fair competition within these markets. By forcing participants to build better and better models to beat each other to get more of the Tau token as a result, you sort of pushing innovation into that direction. And that innovation can take any shape. It can be in the shape of hardware that's better able to process models, or in the shape of software that is better able to process inputs and outputs.
Bittensor is the only ecosystem where if you're beaten by a competitor, you still win because you're still a towel holder. Like, if another research lab comes and tries to build a better product than me on Bittensor and succeeds, and maybe we've duked it out over 6 months and we leave with a portion of tau as well, we're literally like getting to celebrate losing. And I say that in a positive sense that we're all towel holders. Every time there's competition and tension and one team pushes the boat out, we all win. And if we're the one that does that, we help everybody else win. So it's this collaborative, competitive world that's quite unique, I think.
The one thing that's constant in Bittensor is change. And I'm going to apply that to my views and expectations and where I see the network going. If you asked me when I got in October, November 2022, where I thought it would be going, that view changed 3 months later. If you asked me then where I thought it was going, 3 months later, that view changed. Every 3 months, I feel internally where I see this going. It's incredibly inconvenient when you're trying to make a business plan and see where you're going, but it's always in a positive. It always opens my mind as to where we can go next. Once you understand where the network may go and its scope, you realize that confining it within those crypto terminologies still doesn't do it justice.
I think that Bittensor has the potential to become one of the biggest and most well-known projects on the blockchain. I think it's a really powerful use case that answers a lot of questions and addresses a lot of doubts that people have had about Web3 in general, to be honest. The main thing most people will say against it is, but it's not doing anything useful. But then Bittensor came, and now it is. Really, long-term for me, I think if Bittensor makes good on its promise, it's probably going to change the course of AI development, the macro picture, but also it's going to become a very well-known, very well-respected project on the blockchain.
What I hope to see for Bittensor in 5, 10, let's start with 5 years, I'd say is decentralization to the point where the Open Tensor Foundation is no longer relevant. And that means that if someday, God forbid, the worst happens, Jake and I disappear into the jungle, the Open Tensor Foundation is no longer around, it makes no difference. The entire ecosystem runs smoothly as if nothing has changed. That is true, real decentralization, that there's no dependency on the creators in the first place. In 10 years, I want to see Bittensor become the underlying protocol of the entire AI ecosystem, where it becomes to the point where if somebody goes up to a venture capitalist and says, hey, I want $100 million to do this, XYZ, the first question will be, why isn't this a subnet? Why isn't this part of Bittensor? Why are you doing this on your own? In 20, 25 years, I think that seeing Bittensor become as ubiquitous as the internet or TCP/IP, that's really that's the pie in the sky for me.
Right now, we're in a moment of such a supply shortage for GPU chips. The fuel that's basically enabling this current revolution in AI. What success looks like for Bittensor for the next few years is its just ability to demonstrate that it can absorb all of that compute around the world at a time when it's so hard to access. And then these big teams in the Web2 space doing the leading AI research labs joining Bittensor at some point, it just becomes inevitable. It becomes inevitable because there's nowhere else that you can reliably obtain this amount of compute at scale.
I don't think that any single company has a monopoly on the talent necessary for producing intelligence. Right now, the best people are working at proprietary companies, they're raising venture capital, or they're working in big tech somewhere, Apple, Google, Meta, Facebook, what have you. And I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing, because that's kind of the way the world is operating currently. But what I would hope to see would be the smartest researchers, the most talented developers, and all of the best data infrastructure for training the best models actually running and being incentivized on the Bittensor network, because I think that that's kind of the most universally democratic way of producing the best outcomes for humanity.
I hope that in the future, I'm not needed. I hope that Bittensor stays true to its ideals. And I hope that really everybody that is here inside of the ecosystem today, the varying people, there's so many different types of people here, that I hope that they can be aligned with a properly created technology. And it's a technology of alignment. And when we lose people, or some people get cut out of it, I consider that to be the biggest failure of the technology. It's only successful if it can express the disparate types of people, the diversity of people across the globe. So I hope that in the future, there's the same people there are today, plus more.
The Bittensor community, or the Bittensor community brought me in and made me feel so welcome. It's a strange paradigm, but I've never been particularly involved. I was not a big gamer. I've never been particularly involved in forums or online communities. I usually just needed to get done what I needed to get done on the computer and then go and play offline. So this was very new for me to feel this involved with the community and make such strong, what I would definitely consider to be lifelong friends. I mean, I've added to the one-hand friends, the ones you can count on one hand through the Bittensor network. And yet at the same time, we were all in it together for the good of the network. And as the network grows, we still find ourselves building competing businesses. And this is quite interesting. And I can't wish for a better community to do this with. I have had conversations that would not occur in any other industry with my strongest competitors, where we sit there and have a conversation about what we're doing, how we're doing it, accept that we are going after the same users, the same audience, doing many things in parallel, and yet still share information if we feel it's to better the network. In no other industry would I alert my strongest competitor because they're doing something that might be detrimental to the network. I might just sit back and watch them burn. But no, the network is more important at this stage, well, at any stage, to what we're doing, because we all rely on the success of the network for the success of the businesses that we're building.
So I think the Bittensor community breaks all of the pre-held assumptions I had about what it means to market a business. I'll use a small example of the fact that before we even launched as a business, a member of the Bittensor community had scouted us out, dug into all of our channels, and wrote a multi-page paragraph on what we were doing as a business before we told anyone what we were doing. This guy knew more about my business than I did before we launched. And that is the Bittensor community in a microcosm. Our community is our biggest asset, and the more you lean into it, the more you get from it.
The community, best in the world. Don't know how it happened. Kind of think that there was a lot of people involved that are quiet about it, that brought in their friends and made it just the most interesting group of people ever in the world. I didn't do that. I didn't create that community. It arrived, and I'm so glad it did.
Interestingly enough, the community grew on its own. A lot of the early people who joined, people like Robert, they found us organically. They were looking for the problem of decentralized AI on GitHub, and they accidentally found our GitHub, and they joined. Everyone's extremely helpful. Everyone's very eager to help new people understand the system. And a lot of them are people who have been there for a long time, that have just been, they've learned the ropes.
The community is the cornerstone, the bedrock. Without the community, you're nothing.
It's not only based upon money, it's based upon, creating an environment and an ecosystem to support the open source and the decentralized movement for artificial intelligence. And it's that directive that I think is the North Star of the ecosystem that keeps all of the personalities involved. Not only does the ecosystem evolve, but as the open source intelligence community creates new tools, those are incorporated, and you see Bittensor getting better and better, and also contributing to the community around it that supports it.
I think the Bittensor community has been one of the best communities I've ever seen.
The thing that I feel is most exciting about the founders of the project, a la Shaabana and Jacob Steeves, are that they are very, very mission-driven people, and they deeply care about the combination of the philosophy, the long-term sort of consequences and impact that Bittensor can have if it becomes very successful, as well as a very strong grounding in a lot of the challenges and sort of technical issues that need to be addressed along the way. and they both have the chops and the ability to navigate those things. I think the community recognizes that as well.
Realizing that in a healthy ecosystem, in a multifaceted old ecosystems like in old growth forests, our concepts of economics break down, because we have this idea in economics that it's the survival of the fittest or the most powerful or the most fast, which means you must dominate your environment. But in nature, it's actually who gives back to the ecosystem the most that is given the most power in the ecosystem. Our economic way of thinking, our like Darwinistic way of thinking in the West, our hyper-competitiveness is, we've taken, I think, the wrong perspective of nature. It's not, can you out-compete? It is, can you out-contribute? That's what it is in a healthy ecosystem. That's what it is in a healthy town. The people that are most valuable are those that contribute the most. They're the most powerful, the most fastest, strongest, and the biggest guns. That is cancerous. That is an example of an ecosystem that is out of alignment, that is unhealthy. Anybody can contribute to Bittensor. There are so many problems to solve. There's hundreds of different companies in the Bittensor ecosystem. All of them need someone just to bring good energy.
Because the system is effectively an organic community, we don't have a marketing team, we don't have a sales team, we don't have really much of anything. We're just developers and engineers interested in a problem and we're solving it. Anybody who's interested in the system and who has a stake in it, meaning they have some Tau or they want to grow that Tau or in some way help contribute, bring your best talents.
And that's what we're allowing through facilitating a decentralized system. The legacy system is built for centralized systems. The decentralized world is only just beginning to form, and it's going to be bigger than anything we've ever seen before. The nation state of Bitcoin that we situate ourselves in, the continent, only 15 years old. The world of empires and nation states and centralized banking is 2,000 years old. So we have a long trajectory. We have a long way to go, but we have a lot of time. If you're somebody that is overlooked, this is your opportunity to showcase that you're overlooked and go far beyond what it would be potential if you need to submit a resume. We want everyone to come and work with us, you know? Come join, come be, I like to say, come be on our board of directors.